Hello, everybody. Good evening, my little nerdies. I hope everyone's having a great evening. My name is JFun. I have green and black hair, my black glasses on, red lipstick, a book shirt, and suspenders. I'm the content producer and outreach coordinator here at Twitch. Jen, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Jenn Comfort. Pronouns are she, her, and I write nerdy, sexy, bonkers rom-coms. My most recent book, Midnight Duet, is a modern gender-flipped retelling of Phantom of the Opera. And my forthcoming book is called What is Love? And it's a Rivals to Lovers Jeopardy-inspired book, so it's even nerdier. And that's going to be out on February 27th. And in my free time, I like gardening with my dog, who's this space you see here.
Oh, your babies. Maren, would you like to go?
Yeah, hi, I'm Maren Comendant. I own Nook and Cranny Books in Capitol Hill on 15th, if you're in the neighborhood. I am sitting in the store right now because I didn't have time to go home. And yeah, I'm delighted to be here. Am I supposed to be talking about things coming up now, or is that later?
That's later, but you can do your pronouns.
Okay, great. Never mind. Oh, she, her. I'm sorry. Yeah, okay. I don't know what's going on.
Stefanie?
My name's Stefanie Chu. My pronouns are she, her. During the day, I'm the director of marketing for GradeSaver, which is an online platform that provides study guides on popular literatures that's often used in academia. We also make book summary videos. And just for you guys, I also created a playlist of all the videos that we have on banned books. So check that out on our GradeSaver YouTube channel. At night, I am a new adult epic fantasy author. I enjoy writing about complex characters and deep emotional themes, including coming of age, identity, loss, and morality. And this is my debut book, Knights of the Alliance. This is the first in the series. Oh, there you go. And then I have the second book coming out on September 21st. Next month. And if I'm not writing, you can find me raging on Overwatch.
Thanks. Hailey?
I'm Hailey. I use she, her. I am the author of 2 poetry collections, which I've got right here. Stories for When the Wolves Arrive, which is based around folklore, and Out of Love and Spring, which is a smaller chapbook that is my early 20s angsty poems. And most recently, brand new, I was just elected an editor and board member at First Matter Press in Portland, which is a poetry collective. So I'm super excited to be here.
Congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you. That vote went through yesterday night. So
that's so exciting.
Brand new. I don't think I'm even on the website yet officially.
That's awesome. Kate?
I'm Kate Sellers. I use she, her pronouns. I am called the Technical Services Manager at the Seattle Public Library. What that means is that I am partially in charge of the people who get all of the new books and other things ready to be checked out. So I get to see all of this stuff when it comes in, which is really, really fun. I mostly read fantasy and sci-fi, and I'm also a big fan of poetry. So I am looking forward to checking out your books, Hailey. And I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate you all being here. This is so exciting. I know that this is like one of the most anticipated ones I've been looking forward to because I am a huge book nerd and I do love poetry. So I used to do prose and poetry in high school, which is basically I'd pick poems and then I have to act them out to judges and then I would proceed. So it was really, yeah, it was really cool. I did it since I think they train you in like 2nd grade, and then by high school I was going to state, but I did it all the way through my senior year, and it was really awesome. But unfortunately in Texas, you don't really get scholarships for reading prose and poetry. But it was still a lot of fun. So if you guys are joining us tonight, you know that we will be discussing banned books and why we shouldn't ban books. But for an icebreaker, Hailey thought of a really good one. It is, oh my gosh, now I blanked. What was the most recent book you read and what did you like about it? Was that it?
It was just the most recent one you've read and enjoyed. So you don't have to include a recent one you didn't enjoy.
Yeah. Who wants to go first? We don't have to go in the same order, or we can if it's easier.
I'll go first. Okay. Since we did that in dress rehearsal. the last book that I read, it was actually an early copy of Rosie Danan's new rom-com called Do Your Worst. And it's basically about a cursed Scottish castle and then a witchy curse breaker who has to go and break this curse. But when she gets there, she finds this guy who doesn't believe that curses or curse breaking is real. And so it's basically enemies to lovers, and they kind of have to work together to break this curse. And it's just super sexy. Rosie Danan was a debut author with The Roommate a few years ago, and she got a lot of praise for her books being very sexy and sex positive. And so this book kind of continues in that vein, and that it's like a fun, witchy adventure romance in the Scottish Highlands in a castle, but also very sexy. So highly recommend that when that comes out this fall.
We're gonna have to get like a list together so we can post on the Geek Girl website about all of the books, because like I know I'm gonna want to read everybody's book. Who would like to go next? You can
Well, if we want to go in the same order, I can go.
Okay.
I'm in the midst of like a couple that I really love. So the last one that I finished that was awesome, I read Less by Andrew Richard Greer, right? Yes, Andrew Richard Greer. It was great. I wasn't sure what to expect going into it. It looks kind of rom-com-y, but it won the Pulitzer. So I don't know, a little bit of cognitive dissonance there. But it was excellent. The bad synopsis is that Arthur Less is an author and his ex, for lack of a better term, is marrying someone else. So when he's invited to the wedding, he's like, absolutely not, I'm going on a world tour, which he does. But then he keeps running into people that he knows who want to tell him about the wedding. And his writing was excellent, and I'm a little too scared to read the second one. There is a follow-up, but I'm afraid I won't like it as much. So I'm not going to read it yet. Maybe later.
That is a legit fear though, because I've definitely read like some really amazing first ones, and then I'm like, why? Why when it comes to the second? Stefanie?
Yeah, well, to fit our theme, one of the ones I most recently read was The Hate You Give, and I definitely highly recommend that to anyone who hasn't read it yet. It's about a girl who witnesses her friend get shot by the police, and she has to figure out how to live with this guilt and what she has to do about it. Does she tell people, and how does she go forward? And I definitely felt very immersed into the story, even though I'm not African American, but I felt like I could feel the fear and guilt that the main character is going through. And I can't even imagine what reading this book felt like when it first came out in 2017, when gun violence was really starting to escalate in America. And I'm also originally from Northern California, so I recall the day Oscar Grant was shot and how that really impacted our community for years. So I think that was a very powerful read, very well crafted.
Yeah, I cried through that whole book because it is, especially having friends that are Black, and my niece is half like, yeah, but it is definitely one that everyone should read. It definitely opens up your eyes, and even if you're just like, I'm so open, I feel like it calls everybody out on something for sure. Hailey?
I just finished Northwest by Zadie Smith, and I really loved the writing style. I mean, Zadie Smith is always fabulous, but this book specifically, she used several different styles that I don't usually see in prose fiction, and things that bordered on what I would consider even prose poetry at times in terms of how it was written. So, I mean, I could talk about the story, but what I was especially struck by and thinking about was just the way it's written. It's absolutely beautiful.
I think that is part of the story though, because if it's not written in a, you can have a strong plot, but if it's not written well or in a certain way, it doesn't really get it through, which is why, yeah, I really I admire that. Kate?
Well, I hope this one isn't boring compared to all of those great fiction stories. I just read Fashion Before Plus Size, Body's Bias and the Birth of an Industry. And it's by Lauren Downing Peters. And it's a little academic. Like, you really have to like give yourself some time when your brain is awake to read it. I had to like go back and reread a couple sections because I realized I was like reading, but I wasn't comprehending. But it's the story of kind of like the rise of mass manufacture of clothing in the early 1900s, and how they had addressed the inability of the original kind of manufactured pattern drafting to fit people of all different sizes. And it was really interesting to see her in kind of like dissect the advertising of the time. And there's a lot of like images in the book as well. And then compare it to kind of like what the plus size fashion industry is doing right now and in the last couple of years. And it was really uncanny how very closely it was aligned. So I found that really fascinating.
I actually just added all of y'all's books to my phone. So sorry, I looked down for a second because I was like, nope, these are all good. I actually, being plus size and being into fashion, I've always found it very frustrating. Because like, I feel like a lot of, for some reason, like, especially at like places like Torrid, I would go shop and it's like, this year, everyone's going to wear flowers. Next year, everyone's going to wear, I'm like, I don't want to wear flowers. Like, and I kind of settled on mall cloth because like they have like the fun things like this book shirt and dinosaur t-shirts and fun little things that I can wear that are my size that I really like. It's pretty great. So the most recent book that I read and I really like, it's called The Bindle Punk Bruja, and it is by Desirita Mesa, and it's an amazing book. I totally recommend it to anyone, especially if you are Latina and you're half, and you like I am, and you border on that line between, you know, feeling the guilt of like, yes, I ended up being like half white, half Latina, and then having other people in your family like either be darker skinned to you on the Mexican side or being lighter skinned to you on the white side, but never really quite fitting in. And then on top of that, you have all these magical powers. She runs a underground alcohol, I forgot what bootleg kind of like club where she has dancers, and the piano player is like an ex-mob boss's like hitman, and it's a great book. It's absolutely amazing, and the ending blew my mind. So that was like my go-to read for lately, definitely. And of course, it's a big hot book because like witches, I love them. So now that we know a little bit about everyone's book, chat, why don't you guys tell us a little bit about what you're reading lately, of things, what you've been loving, things that you've really just kind of caught your eye and the book era. And I will go on with, we need a note taker. We do need a note taker. Seriously, I'm trying to keep notes on my phone, but it's not working. So I just can't.
Let me just say, my book is written by Andrew Sean Greer. If anyone was actually writing that down, I don't know. My brain didn't work. Andrew Sean Greer wrote that. I was just making things up. That's all.
It's okay. We'll fix it. No worries. I'm sure people would love to like, everyone seems to be, yeah, somebody is writing this down. So we're good. We are all good friends. So as you guys know, our topic today is banned books, and everyone in this room is against that, obviously, or they wouldn't be on this stream. So I want to ask the question, you know, what is, as authors, librarians, bookstone owners, what, when someone says like banned books, like what does that mean to you? Like how, forgot how I put the question in the email, but like how does that, like what does that mean actually? You know, like is that books that, because a lot of the banned books, I feel like they're trying to put a restraint on something. But as someone who works in the arts of books and someone that deals with books daily, like how is that affecting who you are? And Hailey, did you want to go? You're not on mute. It doesn't matter who goes first.
Can I actually start on this one? So
yeah, Kate.
Banned books, it's an attempt to control reality, to reflect what people want to see instead of what actually exists. So as a librarian, and why I became a librarian, it's really important that all viewpoints are represented and that people are able to access things that exist, right? We don't want a constructed reality that only exists of things that have been considered okay by a particular demographic. Everybody needs to have access to information. When I was a kid, I was, like a queer teen in a rural area whose only like exposure to other people like me was through books. And if I hadn't had the public library, it would have taken a lot longer for me to figure things out. So that's like my personal connection there. It was really, really important. But throughout my career, that's what I see. I see kids who need access to information, whether that's factual information or just the ability to connect and learn empathy for people that are like them and people that are not like them. And the people who want to ban that want to control the reality that those kids exist in. I think there's one other type of person who likes to think about banning books. My mother is an example. When I was little, she seriously got mad at the library for having Roald Dahl books. If you remember reading those as a child, the adults in them are often cruel. I think it was Lyle Lyle Crocodile. She was really mad about children being exposed to crocodiles who would eat them. So there's kind of this like concern trolling aspect to it. Like, I don't want this to be the reality that children live in, so I'm going to pretend that it isn't and ban all references to the fact that it is.
Yeah. My first favorite book was James and the Giant Peach, because it resonated a lot with like trauma I was going through as a child. And yeah, it's always stuck with me 100%. And a lot of classrooms didn't want to read it. I actually got the book from the San Antonio Library when I was a kid. And that book got me through a lot, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, and this makes me think too about the construction of childhood, which, childhood as a concept and like how we perceive childhood, and then even the idea of a teenager as a separate stage of life, those are recent. And I know Kate's probably more knowledgeable about this than me as a librarian, but children's literature as a category and teen literature as a category are fairly recent in the scheme of things. And so thinking about that and thinking about books being banned so that children won't have access to certain information that's deemed inappropriate for them, it makes me wonder who is being seen as the child in that situation. Like, who are we picturing when we're picturing a child who needs to be protected from these things? Because some of the things that people say are not appropriate for children, many children are going through. When we talk about, well, we can't show abuse in children's books, many children are being abused. Well, we can't show certain kinds of racism. Children of color do not have the option to opt out of experiencing racism.
Yeah.
And so what is being pictured when we're saying, well, children shouldn't see this? Who are the children who shouldn't see it is an interesting question.
I think about that a lot. Well,
Yeah.
just a lot, period. But I know why the caged bird sings, for example. I recommend that to a lot of people, of course, because it's an amazing book. And then I think about when I read it. I think I was 12 maybe when I read that book. And when I'm talking to folks and recommending it to their children, I'm like, well, maybe I was too young, technically, I don't know, to read that book. But then I realized that when Maya was assaulted in that book at 7, she was 7. So if she was old enough to go through the trauma, I'd say I'm old enough to read about it,
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just at Steamy LitCon this past weekend, which is like the first diversity positive romance convention. So something new that they're trying to do. And one of the things that they actually talked about at their keynote speech is how, book banning is coming for us all, right? So as an author, it's something that, we start to think about, and you don't really start to worry about it until you become like a big author, right? But it will, the number of books that have been requested to be banned has, I think, I went from like 223 in 2020 to like 2,500 this past year. So it's just dramatically increased, and they're coming after the big names right now, but they will come for everyone. And when you look at the reasons that the ALA, the American Library Association, says that people are requesting books be banned, number one is going to be for things of sexual nature, then LGBTQ themes, and then race or diversity, anything that, or religious themes. So basically anything that doesn't conform with like this cis male hetero, Christian identity is being challenged. And so all of a sudden you're going to get this like really, really like monolithic culture that's being put out there in books. And where are people going to see themselves in books if those are the only books being offered?
Yeah.
Yeah, what's crazy, I just read that in Florida, they're starting to ban Shakespeare because of the sexual implications that they have in there. So that's basically all of Shakespeare's plays. But actually, before this, I asked on Facebook what was everyone's favorite banned book. And of course, you get the really controversial ones like Mouse and 1984. And then one person started listing steamy romance books, and they realized that they had a completely different take on what banned books mean. But it was very interesting because that just opened my eyes. Like, there really is no limitation as to what kinds of books are being banned, right? If someone just feels offended by the tiniest little things, that's all it really takes for something to be banned.
Yeah, I am very lucky that, I mean, growing up in South Texas, I grew up in a very conservative town. Like, I don't think we had more than 2 stop signs, like stoplights, sorry, until I came back from college. Most of my books I got when we could afford the internet, getting them offline, buying them offline. And the school just offered a lot of Christian stories, a lot of white male stories, a lot of like, this is what the government says, so you just do it. I mean, our textbooks were hilarious now that I think about it, and like, having been an ex-teacher, I'm like, wow, no wonder it's the way it is in the South sometimes. But it's definitely, I mean, books, I feel like give us that window, especially if you're an introvert, you know, and you like being in your room and you want it, and it gives you a whole new light to things. It's really, it does help you grow as a person. And I think sets open your first steps into becoming like an open-minded adult if you choose to read those books. So my next question is, what are some of your favorite books that are on the ban list? If you could just talk about the type. You don't have to name the titles, because I know that can be a little like, what's your favorite musician? But just like the type of books that are on the ban list that you really appreciate and you don't think should be on there. Anyone can go.
I mean, I think that oh, I'm sorry, please, Stefanie, go ahead.
That's a really tough question, because again, with banned books, it just encompasses such a wide genre. So I think off the top of my head, Charlotte's Web was banned because someone said like, "Oh, talking animals are nonsense." I'm like, well, I love that book though. I love so yeah, and I think the upcoming one I'm working on at work is The Picture of Dorian Gray. And the author was actually sent to prison for 2 years because I've had gay things in there. So I think that's the first 2 things that came on the top of my head, but it's such a huge genre to pick from.
Oh yeah, sorry, I should have narrowed it down, but it's hard to narrow it down when it is like, I feel like they are attacking everybody.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I think it's such a wide
That's
enough
sort of
panel.
what I was going to say about, oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say that that's sort of what my response was going to be, is that I like the books on the ban list because they run the spectrum of things that I'm interested in, which is everything, and they tend to have diverse characters, you know, all sorts of definitions of that word. One of my favorite, so I do a banned books display, I say every year. I've only been open 1 year, but I did it last year and I will be doing it again this year. And then I'll put like little note cards saying why they were banned with the most absurd reasons I can come up with. And my favorite is Alice in Wonderland. Also, it was successfully banned in China in 1931 for having talking animals, right? And I'm like, oh, isn't that hilarious? And then I find out that it was challenged in the United States in 2016 for the same reason. So there's that.
What is wrong with
hilarious when I think about it.
If Noah can fit 2 of every animal on a boat, we could have talking animals. That's all I'm saying. Like, I don't understand the talking animal thing. That is ridiculous.
So speaking of talking animals, but definitely shifting gears, I know someone mentioned mouse a little bit ago, and that's definitely a banned book that I feel is very important. My dad is a Holocaust historian, so we've had a lot of conversations about Holocaust media as we've like read and viewed it together. And mouse specifically is really interesting to me for a couple of reasons, but one of which is that it grapples with the telling of the story. The fact that he's not just telling the story of his father in the camps, but also telling the story of his relationship with his father and his relationship talking to his father about this story and his relationship with publishing this story. In volume 2, he talks about his fear that he's exploiting his father's, like the atrocity that his father faced, and not knowing how to write about something that he didn't experience, but that is part of his family trauma and history. And I think there's something so beautiful about having that grappling be on the page, because so often I've seen this, I was talking to a friend about this earlier actually, but and a lot of media that deals with issues like the Holocaust or slavery, atrocities like that, there's so much a sense of like packaging it into a story. And the ways in which Mouse is messy at the seams in a lot of ways and doesn't quite know how to make sense of it or make it into a story feels very honest in a way that we don't always see with that kind of media.
I think one of the biggest categories of books that are being banned and challenged right now is anything to do with trans people. So there's a bunch of them. I will try to share a list. The Seattle Public Library has a bunch of really great curated lists by trans and non-binary authors, but that's such a big target right now, basically, for the sort of people who like to ban books. So those I think are really important. And there's so many good ones recently. I'm trying to remember one off the top of my head and I can't. Fat and Queer is an anthology that's super good and focuses on trans lives. But yeah, those are being targeted a lot. So I am trying to read as many of them as I can because funnily enough, I like to make up my own mind about what to think about things.
Yeah, I mean, Genderqueer by Maya. Oh, I can't remember their last name now. Anyway, #1 banned book for like at least 2 years running. Pretty wild.
Yeah, one of the hard things that I had when preparing for this panel is that it's actually really hard to find like the complete list of banned books because A, it's changing, and B, it's different by every state, and the ALA doesn't actually reveal all of the books that have been requested just for, you know, for a lot of different reasons. But you know, so it's hard to know like what actually is considered banned. But, you know, the books that you see over and over and over on like the top lists are, you know, again, books by trans authors, but then all of like the anti-racism books, which is really interesting because it's almost like in like, have you all seen Don't Look Up? That's basically like it was out on Netflix and it had Leonardo DiCaprio and Jennifer Lawrence, but it's basically a satire about climate change. And the whole movie was making fun of the media for how they respond to climate change. And sure enough, the response from the media was like, this movie is just like too like obnoxious and in your face about climate change, which is the entire point of the movie, right? And so that's how I feel whenever I look at these like books about anti-racism being on the banned book list. It's like, this book was for you. Like, you are the target audience here. I mean, you like, guess who's banning these books? They're the people who need to be reading them the most, right? You know, and when I was at, again, CNELitCon this past weekend, we were talking at the keynote panel about diversity, and Adriana Herrera had a really great thing that she said that was talking about how readers don't want to read books that, or say they don't want to read books that are cover difficult themes or like traumatic topics, especially when you're reading romance or when you're just reading as a form of escapism. But at a certain point, you have to question, is it escapism or is it fragility, right? Like, why are you so afraid to read these books?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's, I mean, those all bring up really good points, because when I think about people who are trying to ban these books, or even, you know, people who fight for banned books, I'm just like, have you read them? Do you even understand what this book is addressing, what they're saying? Because they are limiting words, they're limiting speech, they're limiting expression, they're limiting art, right? And it irritates me that people think they have the right to do that, especially when it comes to things we do need to know about, like the LGBTQIA community. Sorry, saying it really fast always tangles me up, but it's things that we need to know about because we all exist in this world together. And when we stop and we ban something, it's like we're isolating that population from everybody else to learn about. And I don't understand why people think that's okay. I think it just opens doors. Oh, go ahead.
I think there are elements of fragility and discomfort, but I also think that there are people who are doing it very intentionally and are very intentionally saying, we do not want this information to be available, and we want to perpetuate things that keep us in power. And I think that in these conversations, it's easy to not include that element, but there are people who absolutely do not want their kids to know that queer people exist. They're absolutely, I mean, call it what it is. They're absolutely white supremacists who do not want their kids engaging with people of color, having empathy for people of color, learning the things that they would learn from those books. And it can be difficult at times because those people are not saying that out loud, to tell the difference between people doing that and people experiencing the fragility that you might be able to get past and actually build some empathy versus the people who already, it's on purpose.
Yeah.
We have really interesting conversations in the library about that all the time as librarians. I haven't worked in the public floor for a couple of years, but before that, the kind of fragility piece is actually the conversations I would have the most. It's the people who were like, actually, I don't want my child to be reading the racism depicted in Mark Twain without my participation, or like my knowledge. So I want that book to not be available to anybody under a certain amount of age. And you can think, well, yeah, no, there is a lot of racism in that book. Contextually, it's kind of important. And it's something that if you have these conversations with people, you can sometimes help them through that initial feeling of discomfort and fear. And a lot of that is, I think, really important work that has to be done. And that's where we make progress.
Yes.
But there are definitely people doing it on purpose, and those folks don't have to come into the library to make their complaint. We don't usually see them.
Yeah. There's definitely people doing it on purpose. There's definitely people that I think about it every day. I'm like, why are you in charge of like a whole lot of people and what we hear and see, and still not let us hear and see everything? I mean, how wonderful would it have been for me, like growing up in like a prominently white town and being a little bit darker skinned than my bright brothers, and like when I got different treatment than they did, like I would have loved to pick up a book and have them explain to me, race, like dynamics, like what that does to you, like how it's just like you're not alone. Because I feel like that's what books for me ultimately give me, is like, wow, you didn't think that. You're not alone when you think that. You're not alone when you feel this. And that's something that so many people are missing out of now, because they just want to put limitations on everything. I know that I know one of the questions that I wanted to ask you guys is, if you can think of like one off the or several off the top of your head, what are some of your favorite going to be banned or banned? Because prepping for this, you're right, the list goes on and on. LGBTQIA books that are out there that you feel like people just need to read to understand, to get to know, like that would be amazing. Mine is a kid's book. It's Julian is a Mermaid. So I think that's a great book. I definitely think it should be in every elementary classroom, like all the time. But yeah.
I've already listed mine, The Hate You Give. I think that's definitely something everyone should read. I didn't read this one yet, but I heard a lot about Flamer by Mike Corrado, and I think that's it's a coming of age graphic novel, and that's definitely something I want to pick up next time.
Awesome.
I really love a short story anthology called Xenocultivars, Stories of Queer Growth. It's edited by Jed Sabin and Isabella Oliveira, and it's a collection of short stories, kind of like queer plant core focused. And it's really, really, really fun. So you can find any genre you want. It covers a lot of different things, but it's focused on queer growth, which I think is a really good theme, and it gets explored in very interesting ways by all the different authors.
Yes. I agree.
I don't have a specific title, but obviously I'm opposed to banning books, but I do love that once they're banned, it immortalizes them, because there's a lot of books on that top, 20 list that I love and think are exceptionally important, and maybe they wouldn't have got noticed if people hadn't been making us think about it. So there we go.
I don't know why you would make us think about love. We need more love. Everything. We need so much love in this world nowadays. Jen, do you have any off the top of your head, or Hailey?
I feel bad because I tend to read mostly like adult fictions, and I didn't, when I was growing up, I was just still reading romance novels, which is adult fiction. So it's just a different kind of education. And like queer romance novels and that whole like LGBTQ queer books have only recently become more mainstream. So now we're seeing like this renaissance, which is amazing. Like Anita Kelly writes really great non-binary heroes. F.T. Lukens is actually, I know from, they are published with my same agent, but they write like YA, like romantic fantasy. Their latest is called Spellbound, and it's about like rival apprentice sorcerers, and it's really awesome. But the most recent one that I read that is like an adult romance sci-fi would be This Is How You Lose the Time War, which got very popular lately because of Twitter. But oh my God, that blew my mind. Just so beautifully written. And it's like, yeah, I mean, guess it's a queer love story, but it's also a lot of other things. Definitely best to go into that book knowing as little as possible about it.
That's actually one of the top 10 books that people have been checking out through the library's Books Unbanned program, which is interesting to me. It's a mix of things. But yeah, that book, don't read anything about it. Just read it.
Yes.
So I guess I have kind of a different answer to this question, because I don't know if I have any specific books that I feel like everyone needs to read. But I was at dinner with my parents and my little sister last week, and my little sister is also queer. And we were talking, and I found out that one of the books that I read, that's YA, when I was like 12 years old and going to Seattle Public Library and going through the catalog and typing in gay and seeing what books came up, and checking out the like 12 YA books that the library had. But I found out the one that really resonated with me at that age, I probably was about 12 years old, was also one that my sister read and resonated with her. It's Rainbow Boys. And she had recently reread it and was wanting to talk about it. And I was just flooded with memories of that being one of the first gay books I read as a child, and like being a little nervous checking out at the library and things like that. But part of what was so amazing about that book for me was having the three very different protagonists and all of them dealing with their journey and their sexualities really differently. And I don't know, I think that queer literature has come a long way since then. I don't know if that book is as needed to kids now as it was for me then, but it was very needed for me at the time I read it. And it was kind of amazing to find out that the same was true for my sister.
That is so amazing. I love this sibling connection. I cannot say that my brothers and I ever read the same book.
It was so cool. She was like, I just reread this, and I was like, oh my God, let's talk.
I love it when you like find someone that reads the same book as you. One of our social media person, Emerald, and I tend to read the same witchy cozy books, and we just read the Torch, and like it's that connection you get with someone when they've read, and it's a queer LGBTQIA like open witchy book, and I was like, oh my gosh, you read that too, and then we got to like bond on it, and bonding over books is probably the best. I'm so glad that you and your sister got to do that. That's so cute. I love that. So on the same topic, but just like I know I did post this question in the email, but who is your favorite non-binary, trans, queer like heroine, hero of a book? Who like one that you recently picked up and you were just like, wow, like, or you didn't have to be recent, and like you said, Rainbow Boys like totally helped you, blew your mind. What are some characters that come to mind when asked that question?
Okay, so this is like not on the nose, but it's something I recently found out and was really excited about. Because when I was a kid, I was obsessed with Harriet the Spy. Loved Harriet the Spy. Got in trouble for spying on my friends because I wanted to be Harriet the Spy. And last year, I think a biography of Louise Fitzhugh came out, which was wonderful. And I knew nothing about her until I read this book. And it turns out she was this queer icon in the 60s. And the more I read about her and her life, the more I realized how much of herself she put into her character. And one, it explained a lot about why I loved her so much. Maybe it should have clued me in at the time. But also I think it feels that much more groundbreaking that I don't know, she felt, I mean, if they'd had a word for gender nonconforming at the time, then I feel like maybe she would have been spreading that gospel, as it were. It was very, I don't know, what is the word I'm looking for? I don't know. It felt very personal to me, and I appreciated it.
I loved Harriet the Spy. The movie, when it came out, I watched it like 50 million times. I loved that.
I'm honestly not sure I've seen the movie. I don't remember.
It's adorable.
Okay.
So speaking of movies and books, I just watched the Netflix Nimona movie, which brought back like all of the Nimona webcomic. I remember reading it when it was being posted like week by week. So it's Nimona by N.D. Stevenson, and the author is trans. And I really love the way that the TV adaptation did a really great job of like having Nimona resist categorization, which I felt like was on several levels, not just gender, but it was really important that every time somebody asked Nimona, what are you? Who are you? The answer is, I'm Nimona. And like, why the F do you care about any other part of it? So that just came to mind when I was reading the question, because I think Nimona is an excellent non-binary and sort of like, you can't categorize me and you better stop trying or I'll hit you kind of character that I really love.
We actually, Janae, who picks and does our book club that was like our first book club book. And it was, yeah. And then we recently did Heartstoppers, which is also like amazing. But no, I loved it. And that she's a shapeshifter. I just like, amazing. That's such a good book and graphic novel. Sorry. I love it. Jen, did you?
Janet from The Good Place, you know how like Janet is like, you know, she's like not a girl. Janet is like and like a robot basically, or an artificial intelligence or something. So it's like a Janet becomes like a noun almost, or a pronoun unto itself. So I really liked that.
Yeah, one of my non-binary friends, we've been friends for like 20 plus years, and they've gone through a lot of changes, but one of the nicknames I have for them is Q from Star Trek, which is just like the intelligent being of all knowing and everything around. And so I call them Q.
Oh, I have feelings for Q.
Yeah.
So when I saw this question in the email, I actually went through, one of my friends and I, we have a blog together. We don't actually, it's not active. So kind of, we used to have a blog together. Basically, we were tracking queer characters who we found in media. We started it in like 2015, 2016, when it was still, most of the media we were seeing didn't have queer characters. So when it did, we were like, okay, got to track that. And so I went through the tag for non-binary characters specifically, because you had specifically referenced that in the question. And one of the things I found that didn't surprise me that much, actually, because as I was thinking about non-binary characters, a lot of who I was coming up with were like characters like Janet, who are sort of non-binary, but also like it's complicated. And at the time that we were working on this blog, I was watching a lot of YouTube web series that were being made by like random teenagers and college kids, basically.
That's awesome.
They were kind of in the literary inspired web series movement. So brief history of that movement, you know, there was Lizzie Bennet Diaries, which was really big. And then there were a bunch of web series that came out of that, like Nothing Much to Do, Green Gables Fables, things like that. And then there was this even smaller spin-off of people who watched those and were like, can we please have some fucking queer characters, basically. And most of the non-binary characters who I've seen portrayed, who are actually referred to as non-binary or discuss pronouns, any of those elements were in web series like 12th Grade or whatever, which is 12th Night, but in a high school, and it was written by a high school student and put on. But a lot of it was kind of queer teens and young adults seizing the means of production in terms of media and saying enough is enough and we're going to write what we want to. But also made me kind of sad to realize that, like, you know, in 2015, when I was watching a lot of indie media with like 100 to 1,000 views on YouTube, was when I was seeing the most non-binary characters. Like mainstream TV has not caught up. Mainstream books have not, especially caught up in some of those areas.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are seeing in romance a lot more trans and non-binary characters as like the main characters, more mainstream as well. Not just in indie published, but in traditional published as well, which is awesome. And I already mentioned Anita Kelly because I got to give them a shout out. Like I couldn't pick a favorite, but I definitely also want to mention RM Virtues because they are writing some badass trans characters, and they have a Hades Persephone retelling called Drag Me Up. That's basically where Persephone is a Black trans like acrobat, and it is amazing. Definitely, if you read romance, you're looking for erotic romance, it is a hot book.
Awesome. All of those words were just happiness to me. Like, that's amazing. Stephanie, would you like to add anything?
No, sorry, this was the one question I couldn't really figure out an answer.
You're fine. I was trying to find like vague questions that we could like, that would just spark. Because sometimes I ask questions and people like deer in the headlight looks, and then I'm like, okay, never mind.
This was my deer in the headlights question.
So I was like, if I give them the questions ahead of time, they can deer in the headlights, and I know that they're going to do that. It would be awesome. But yeah, I think that I am really actually glad that the non-binary thing is coming up, because I identify as non-binary. I actually identify as not having a label because I'm not female 100%. And I don't 100% think that I'm masculine. I know when I was in my mom's stomach for like all 9 months, they were like, oh, she's a boy. They're going to be a boy, going to be a boy. And when I was born, my dad was really concerned when I didn't come out with the male body parts. And so he was asking if there was something wrong with me. And the nurse looked at him and said, like, you have a girl. Like, what's going on? And growing up with all boys, it wasn't until high school where people were like, oh, you're a girl, like you have to act this certain way, you have to dress cute. Like, I don't think I wore a skirt until my sophomore year of college. And so it's nice to see characters and books that also identify that part with me. Like I am not strange for not picking one or the other. Like I 100% am just me. And that's just enough. Like I don't understand what anyone else wants from that. Like, why do I have to have like one or the other? Why can't I just have both and just be who I am? And so yeah, but a lot of witchy series are coming out with non-binary characters or warlocks that fall in love with each other, and I'm all about that. I'm like, yes, bring it all in, expand this little mind, give me things that I never thought about. Maybe like raunchy or non-raunchy or like just educational, 100%. So we're coming up on 8 o'clock. It's okay if we go a little over because I think this next question, like as we're saying everybody that goes to the panel, I just want you guys to promote yourself, like tell me what's up next, show your books, show your store. Just let us know, kind of like redo your intros if you want. Jen, would you like to go first?
Sure. So yes, I have 2 books currently published. I have The Astronaut and the Star and Midnight Duet. You can find them both in most bookstores or online. And also plugging the audiobook for Midnight Duet. It won an award. The audiobook, the narrators do like all the voices, and it's really, really good. And then I do have a Jeopardy inspired, because I'm ultra nerdy. So this is a Jeopardy inspired rivals to lovers rom-com about 2 people who are like the 2 best Jeopardy players essentially in the world, and they have to compete in this ultimate tournament. So if you like Jeopardy, it's basically like Ken Jennings versus James Holzhauer, except, not weird because those are real people. But yeah, so that comes out in February, and yeah, that's what I have to plug. You can find me on Instagram at jen.comfort.author.
I actually have Duet on Audible, and it is really good. It's really amazing. I got it after the first time you were on one of our panels.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Oh, Maren, you want to go next?
Sure, yeah. So we just came off like a really busy couple of weeks, so now it's a little calmer at the store. But in the fall, what do I have? On the 22nd of September, we're doing a book launch with Tom Fucaloro, who he founded the Seattle Bike Blog, and he just came out with a book called Biking Uphill in the Rain, which is a brilliant title, and it's about how Seattle became like such a big biking city when it doesn't really have any of the elements that are conducive to having fun on bikes. So that's going to be fun. It's going to be at Overcast Coffee on union. And then I have a local author. Her name is Zarina Van Patten, and her book is called, it's self-published, and it's called Mail Order Family, and it's about her immigrating from the former Soviet Union and marrying an American. She's got hustle, and she's very funny, so that'll be fun. And then since I heard we might have some nannies out there in the world, in October, I'm so excited about this. You know the Narwhal and Jelly books by Ben Clanton. They're my favorites. I'm obsessed. I love them so much. His newest one that just came out is Spooky Narwhal and Jelly. And so in October, we're doing a waffle Halloween party, and he's going to come sign books. And I am like, I don't care if no one shows up. I'm going to eat waffles, and I'm going to talk to Ben, and I'm going to get all the books signed, and I'm very excited. So I haven't like officially announced that online, but it is happening on the 28th of October. So bring your kids.
I will totally come eat waffles with you. So funny story real quick about narwhals. When I was a preschool teacher, I named my classroom, I changed the name from ponies to narwhals, and all my preschool parents thought that it was fake. They didn't know that it was, a narwhal was real. And we raised money for narwhals, and then they finally realized, like, oh, this is a real animal. I'm like, yeah. Like,
Yeah,
it's true.
it's so cool.
Yeah, they are. I love their little spots. Sorry, off topic. Stefanie.
I just want to say I'm so excited for the waffles. Yeah. So again, my name is Stefanie. I write new adult epic fantasy. If you like original stories with magic, realistic characters, check out my book, Knights of the Alliance. It's a multi-protagonist story about a group of fighters that are uniting to end eras of hostility between neighboring empires. It's like a mix between Game of Thrones and Avatar: The Last Airbender. My second book, Book of Resilience, is releasing on September 21st, and you can either DM me or email me for a free advance copy. You can also follow me on Instagram, stephaniechu.author.
Yay. Hailey.
I'm Hailey Spencer. I am a local poet. I have this collection, Stories for When the Wolves Arrive, which is based around folklore. This is available in a number of bookstores, including Nook and Cranny. It's also available on my website, haileyspencerwrites.com. I also have a shorter chapbook, Out of Love in Spring, and some art related to my books. The best place to buy the chapbook and the art would also be my website. And I'm on Instagram at Out of Love in Spring.
We should all get everyone's book into Nook and Cranny so I can get those.
I'm going to be doing a bunch of suggestions.
I don't have Jenn's yet, but next.
Too.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Kate, you gotta like give her the book idea.
So I'm Kate. I work at the Seattle Public Library. The couple things that I wanted to plug are that if you don't know, you can get personalized book recommendations from my lovely coworkers who are all much more well-read than I am and excellent at finding exactly what you want to read. So it's called Your Next 5 Books, and you can find it on the website, spl.org. And you just write in with the last couple of books that you really loved and want to find something like that. You can even say something like, this is how the book made me feel, and I would like to feel like that again. And they will figure something out. So you can get personalized book list recommendations from wonderful librarians. And if you know folks who need access to books and don't have it currently through their own libraries because of book banning or other restrictions, we have the Books Unbanned program where anybody in the country age 13 to 26, I believe that's correct, can get access to our ebooks if they don't qualify for a library card. So please promote that to folks. We want to make sure that we're helping people get access even when they don't live here. And the other thing I'll just recommend is that even if you're not getting personalized recommendations from librarians, our staff are working really hard to put out awesome book lists on our catalog website. So again, spl.org, and then you can search for staff picks. Some recent ones were Indigiqueer 2023, trans or non-binary authors, LGBTQIA poets. So there's a lot of really good lists, and you can find some new stuff.
I will give a shout out to the ebooks because when I first moved here, I couldn't get a library card because the pandemic hit. And so ebooks were how I survived. It's legit. Like it's an amazing. And then also I just love the Seattle Public Library so much. Like I feel like when you move to a new place, like the coziest thing you have is the library, right? Like that in a record store and a coffee shop. You couldn't go to a coffee shop and you couldn't go to a record store. So the library was like, also such a big savior. So it was pretty awesome. Before we close out, I just want to ask chat if there's any questions that you guys have or anyone that's on the panel tonight. Real SG1 says, true story. I didn't know about narwhals until probably 10 years ago. I'm not laughing. I am laughing like I just remember the parents being like, why is this dyed hair queer woman calling my kids' classroom narwhals here in Texas? Like how much I had to prove to them that it was real. It wasn't just making it up. Oh. And then MJD Gamer Engineer, great to hear from everyone. Happy to stop by from Playtest Northwest. Have a great evening. Thank you for stopping by. Well, I think that is all for tonight. I really appreciate you all coming on panel. I know this was the first time for a lot of y'all. Please come back. You're more than welcome into the GeekGirlCon space. Just to give everyone a reminder, GeekGirlCon is back for 2 days. And I always get the dates wrong, but I'm pretty sure this time it's the 7th and 8th. We were at MeowCon, and I think me and Brian were telling people the wrong dates completely, but like we got it together. So it's October 7th and 8th. Please come. We will have panels. We will have science. We will have fun stuff. On Thursday, we have board game night with Abby and Joe Meeples. And I believe that wraps it up for this. Thank you guys for joining us for Lit Club. Please check out everybody and their books. We'll send out a book list soon so we can all read them. We appreciate you all. Have a good night.
Thank you
Who
for
are we gonna
having
rate? Sorry, we're gonna rate somebody. I kind of rushed that one. Oh yeah, great conversation. Awesome. Well, we'll rate somebody. I promise. They're on there. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.